resolutions that have also called for the return of the fenced town of Varosha to its lawful inhabitants and its transfer to the administration of the UN. And yet, 50 years of resilience and hope by Cypriots, hope for peace, a burning desire and a deep belief by my people, by all Cypriots, that this cannot be the future of Cyprus. It cannot be the future of our children and of the generations to come. They deserve to live, to thrive in coexistence and co-creation in a reunified country in conditions of viable peace. I'm often asked, dear friends, if I'm optimistic about peace in Cyprus after 50 years. Let me recall the words of Jean Monnet, one of the inspired founders of the European Union, when he proclaimed that this is not the time for blind optimism or paralyzing pessimism. Now is the time to be determined. And so the answer is that I'm determined to work tirelessly and bravely for peace in Cyprus, to reunify my country and its people in a modern, viable European state with no troops of occupation, no foreign guarantees. I'm determined to provide for all Cypriots all rights and fundamental freedoms that other Europeans enjoy. They deserve nothing less. I'm determined not to fail them. To my Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot compatriots, I hear your call for peace. It has not faded over time. It has grown louder, more determined. We look to the UN Secretary General, who understands the imperative of reunification, to fulfill the promise of peace, to deliver on the pledge of the UN Charter. I'm determined to continue exerting all efforts to resume negotiations for a viable solution to the Cyprus issue with the only framework, the relevant UN Security Council resolutions that call for a bizonal, bicommunal federation with political equality as defined by the relevant UN Security Council resolutions and fully in line with EU law, values and principles. Your Excellencies, since the last time I stood before you in this hall, we have exerted every effort to resume the peace process. There is no alternative to the path of peace. I'm committed and I'm ready to sit at the negotiating table today, not tomorrow, today. I have clarity of vision for the future of my country, for the future of our children in a unified, prosperous, viable European state. To Mr. Erdogan, history will judge us, and history is unforgiving in the light it casts on leaders who have an opportunity to deliver peace and instead choose the path of revisionism and disregard for international law. Those who want to lead must lead by example. The voice of morality, Mr. Erdogan, cannot have selective historical amnesia or selective sensitivity to violations to international law. The aggressor, the violator of international law, cannot be the advocate of legality nor point the finger to others. On this podium yesterday, we heard Mr. Erdogan call for the disregard of the UN Charter, the violation of the UN Security Council resolutions and international law, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And my response, the response of the international community, is clear. Illegality stemming from invasion, aggression, and use of force cannot be recognized. International law is not a la carte. Its interpretation does not change depending on who is the violator. It applies equally to all contexts, to all countries. It applies to Turkey, a country that 50 years ago used force in violation of the UN Charter, invaded the sovereign state, and is an occupation force in Cyprus. It is an affront to this plenary to name an invasion a peace operation. Revisionists cannot change reality. not now, not ever. To Mr. Erdogan, I also say now is the time to deliver on your proclaimed commitment to international law and to peace. No country that believes in the moral superiority of its position refuses to sit on the negotiating table. I adamantly believe that we can carve a new path, one of peace, cooperation and collaboration. We cannot change geography. It is an opportunity, not a curse. Turkey and Cyprus will always remain neighbours. Let us change the narrative. Let us transform our proximity into a promise. Let us build together a legacy of peace that can be transformative for the whole region. Ladies and gentlemen, in our common agenda, the Secretary General remarked that humanity faces a stark and urgent choice, and break down or break through. I welcome the Secretary General's new agenda for peace and support multilateral efforts towards peace and security. Collective action is urgently needed to address the changing nature of conflicts, including challenges posed by new technologies, the climate emergency, rising inequalities, and backtracking on human rights. Halfway to the deadline, it is alarming that our world is off track to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Despite some glimmers of hope, action, transformative solutions and comprehensive reforms are urgently needed. The agendas and resolutions are in place. We don't need more words. We need action. Human rights constitute the backbone of the multilateral system, and it is a top priority for Cyprus foreign policy, guided by our long-lasting commitment to promoting, protecting, and fulfilling all human rights, as well as advancing and strengthening international human rights within the United Nations. Cyprus has announced its first-ever candidacy for the Human Rights Council for the period 2025-27, with elections taking place this fall. Our candidature stems from our deep dedication to promoting, protecting, and fulfilling basic human rights for all, as well as advancing and strengthening international human rights within the United Nations system. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is at an inflection point. Our children, the generations to come, are watching, and they will hold us accountable. The decisions we make today, the courage and vision we transform into action, have the potential to change the trajectory of the world. We have an opportunity to come together and, through multilateralism, by upholding the primacy of the UN Charter, to build a safer, more secure world. The nature of the challenges we face is such that no country can address it on its own. We need to come together. We